I will say it is an incredible zechus Baruch Hashem to be able to learn with you. I'm sorry that I can't be there with you in person, but at least Baruch Hashem we have the opportunity to do so virtually. So today's daf is Kuf Samech Ches. We thank all of our sponsors for this morning. Share all the sponsorships I will post in Meretz Hashem in the WhatsApp chat, as well as in the shared description in YouTube. We thank all of our Talmud Torah sponsors, our annual Talmud Torah sponsors, our monthly Talmud Torah sponsors. It is a great zechus, and of course, as always, we dedicate our learning in the zechus of our precious hostages. May HaKadosh Baruch Hu return them to their families, b'shalom and b'karav, and in the zechus of our holy soldiers, may they be successful. B'chol ma'aseh yedei. So with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Kuf Samech Ches 168. We are picking up on the bottom of Kuf Samech Simon Beis 167b. 5 lines up from the bottom. Hu tavra davachasim ali Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba. An interesting case. There was a tavra. Tavra is a receipt. So again, this is the document that would be used if a woman collected her ksuba. So this would be the receipt that ultimately the ksuba was paid. So the Gemara says if there was a particular receipt, ksuba receipt that Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba had signed on. So the woman whose name is mentioned in the receipt comes before Rabbi Yirmiyah. She says, "It's not me. It's not me. This was a forgery. Someone else wrote this, but even though it's my name, this is not my receipt." Amar ananami amar lahu lav ihi. So Rabbi Yirmiyah says, it's interesting. When you walked into the Beis Din, I even said to the other people who were involved in the shtar, I don't recognize that woman. I don't think that's the woman whose receipt this is. Va'amruli, and the people responded to me. They said, Meikashu de kashala ubagar lakala. Essentially, what they said, Rabbi Yirmiyah is the same woman. Just the years have not been kind. She literally translated, she got older and her voice got deeper, which means she got old. So you remember her from when she was younger, but this is the same woman. Amar Abaye. And therefore it turns out the woman was trying to get out of it. In other words, she was trying to fraudulently say that it wasn't her receipt and that she had not been paid for her ksuva, when in fact she had. 168. Even though normally the halacha is kevan shehegid shuv eno chozer magid, and normally the halacha is like this: once a witness gives testimony, you can't go ahead and retract it or recant it. That's kevan shehegid. Once you say something, you can't retract it. So b'pashtos, what's interesting about this case is as follows. Rabbi Yirmiyah essentially said, he agreed, you're not the woman. Now, ultimately, he's saying she is the woman named in the shtar. So even though normally once you give testimony, you can't go ahead and recant or retract, the assumption is that a Talmud Chacham doesn't normally look at women, and therefore again it would be normal that halacha l'maisa he would not have recognized this woman so quickly. In other words, so this is a different kind of case, that the assumption is that a Talmud Chacham is not looking at women who are not his wife. So therefore again he's not going to be so careful, therefore necessary in being able to identify who it is that's here, and therefore Rabbi Yirmiyah was confused, understandably so, because probably he didn't take such note of this woman to begin with, and then once it was clarified, this wasn't considered to be a retraction. Another example of this, there was a receipt document for a ksuba that Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba had signed on Amrale. So the woman mentioned in it said, Rabbi Yirmiyah bar Abba, Lav ana havai. It's not me in the shtar. Amrala ivra ant hava. Rabbi Yirmiyah said, yes, it is you. So Amar Abaye says, Afagav the sermon Abanalab or Chilameda Kiva the duck. This is interesting. Even though normally we say that a Talmud Chacham might not necessarily look at a woman and therefore might not be so versed in terms of her features, being able to identify her. So, but if he says that he is certain, then we trust his certitude. So, it's interesting, like this balance. On one hand, the Talmud Chacham doesn't look at women. On the other hand, if a Talmud Chacham says, I recognize this woman and this is the woman for whom we wrote the receipt, he is believed. Amar Abaye. Abaye says as follows: This is interesting. A Talmud Chacham who goes to betroth the woman should take an Am Haaretz with him. Why? Lest someone come to try to go ahead and switch the woman. Meaning, this is actually incredible. The assumption is that the Talmud Chacham may not look so carefully at the woman. Out tznius, perhaps he's not looking at her, even though, again, it's his intention to marry her. Therefore, take an Am Haaretz with you. Am Haaretz looks at women. The Rashbam says over here, Am Haaretz shemistakil umakir benoshim. And Am Haaretz looks at women. So therefore, if a Talmud Chacham wants to betroth someone, take an Am Haaretz with you. That way, again, you'll ensure that halacha l'maisa, it's the right woman. Incredible. So remember again, the Mishnah then went on to discuss this idea about who pays for the shtar. So for example, in a get, the husband pays for the get. So the Gemara says, my time, what's the reason why the husband pays for the get? Because the pasuk says v'kasav v'nasan, because the pasuk says he will write it and he will give it. So the assumption over here is that he is responsible for the writing of the get, i.e. the payment to the sofer to write the get. Now this is interesting. The Gemara says, but contemporary practice is not like this. Contemporary practice is that the woman pays for the get. Now, why is it that the woman pays for the get? So again, the Gemara explains, lest the husband use it as a delay tactic. In other words, the husband was supposed to pay for it. The problem just was Chazal saw that the husband was delaying in paying. The sofer is not going to work for free, and this was the husband's delay tactic in giving the get. So what did Chazal say? Chazal said, you know what, the woman could pay for it as well. So the obligation is still upon the husband, but a wife has the ability to pay for the get as well in order to expedite the process. Incredible. So the halacha is you could write a shtar for the borrower even if the lender is not with him and the borrower pays for the document. So the Gemara says pshita, that's obvious. So in other words, of course, the assumption is who's paying for the document, the one who gets the benefit from it. So it's the borrower who gets the benefit. So of course he's going to pay for it. Talking about the heter iska, where ultimately an iska means a business dealing. So in this type of business dealing, the lender is also benefiting. I might have thought, therefore, the lender is obligated to pay, or maybe even split. Kamash malon, the borrower is obligated to pay for the document. So similarly, again, with a seller and a buyer, so it's the buyer who is obligated to write the shtar, to pay for the shtar. Pshita, now what's the case over here? Well, let's say Reuben's selling a field to Shimon. So the Mishnah says Shimon, the buyer, is obligated to pay for the document of sale. But again, we're talking about a case where Reuben has an inferior field and therefore is looking to offload it. So because it's a benefit for him also to go ahead and sell it, you would have thought, perhaps I might have thought that halacha l'maisa, that the seller should have to pay for the document. Kamash malon, he doesn't, always the buyer. Incredible. In kosin shtari erisin. Pshit lo tzricha. So this is interesting. So again, who's paying? Who's paying for the shtari erisin? So remember again, the Mishnah said, right, v'chasen nosin schar. The chasen is the one who pays for the document for erisin. So the Gemara says pshita. Again, once again, it's the husband who's getting a wife. So of course he's going to go ahead and pay for it. To which the Gemara says, when it comes to a Talmud Chacham, you might say, you know what, it's benefit for the father-in-law to be able to acquire, to be able to have such a son-in-law. So maybe the father-in-law should have to pay for the shtar erisin. Kamashon the chasen does. Okay. So the Gemara goes weiter. Ein kosin shtar arisos v'kablanos. So again, remember, it is in a sharecropping agreement. It is the sharecropper himself who pays for the document. To which the Gemara says, pshita, isn't that obvious? Lotzricha bibora. Now we're talking about a field that in the initial year of sharecropping has to be left fallow. So because it's left fallow, the sharecropper is not getting an immediate benefit from this, but nevertheless the obligation to pay for the document is still upon him. In kosin shtari berin elim dashnehem. You only write shtari berin with the consent of both parties. I asks the Gemara, my shtari berurin, what is this? So one approach is that, this is actually interesting, that what Beis Din, I never really saw this before, that what Beis Din would do is, the Rashbam points out, Shnei Sofer Adayon Hayu Kosin Tainus Anshe Ariv Kedei Shlo Yutonim B'Chozron Antonin. So the Beis Din would have scribes, would have Sofrim. The Sofrim would interview the plaintiff, the defendant, and they would record their claims in a document. By recording the claims in the document, that essentially ensures that no one changes their story. So that's first opinion, Shtari Bererin. Hachat Hagimu, Shtar Nazar. Rabbi Bar Abba Amar Zeb Borer Lo Echad V'Zeb Borer Lo Echad. So Rabbi Bar Abba has a different approach. There's a concept I will say of this idea that halacha l'maisa, when creating a Beis Din, under certain circumstances, each side will choose a dayan, and then each of those dayanim, each of those judges choose a third. So they would codify this arrangement in what's called Shtari Bererin. Incredible. Okay. So Rabbi Shmuel Silber disagrees. He holds that with Shtari Bererin, each one gets their own shtar. Each one gets their own document. So the Gemara says, Lema bekolfen amida stom kamiflagi. So it says, here's what's interesting. So essentially, if you go with the first approach, right? If you go with the first approach, that Shtari Bererin is really a document that outlines the respective claims of both parties. So in reality, you should have one document that records the claims of Reuven and Shimon. Rabbi Shmuel Silber says each party has the ability, the parties have the ability to say, I want my own shtar. I want my claims recorded in my own shtar. I don't want it recorded jointly with the other party. So the Gemara says, what's the machlokes over here? Perhaps, lima b'kolfin al midas stom kamiflagi. So we'll say there's a concept of midas stom. Midas stom is that when you have the ability to benefit someone else and it doesn't put you at a disadvantage, but you still refuse to do that, so that's called like a sodomite behavior. So in Sodom, right, they just didn't want to benefit anyone else, even if it wasn't to their own detriment. In other words, if asking me to do something nice for another person is going to put me at a disadvantage, okay, I hear why maybe I can't be compelled to do that. But if doing something nice for someone in no way compromises me, then why shouldn't I have to do it? So the Gemara says over here, perhaps that's the machlokes over here. The Mar Savar Kofin or Mar Savar in Kofin. Tanakama holds no. The Shtari Bererin, everybody records their tainus, their claims in the same document, and one party can't force the other party to do two different documents. That's totally unnecessary. That's like midas stom. That's just being unnecessarily difficult, and we don't let that. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Shmuel says, no, if that's what the parties want, then if that's what one of the parties want, then we'll do that. To which the Gemara says, Lo ducholi amakofin. The Gemara says, no. Everyone agrees that when it comes to midas stom, when it comes to just difficult behavior for the sake of being difficult with absolutely no benefit, we will force a person to behave normally. So what's the machlokes over here? Reuven could say to Shimon, you know what? I don't want us to work on a document together. I don't want our claims to be recorded in the same document. You know why? The dumbest aloi ki ari arba, because you're to me like a pouncing lion. Now, what does that mean? So, in other words, you could actually understand this, that there could be an intimidation factor. That essentially, Rabbi Shmuel says like this: that Reuven could say to Shimon, it's not that I'm being difficult, it's that you're intimidating. So if we have to both give our statements, so to speak, to the court scribe, to the sofa of Bezin together, you're going to intimidate me, pepper me with questions and different things like that. I don't want that. Therefore, again, you record your document, you record your claim in your document, and you record your claim in your documents. That's the machlokas here. Tanakama says, if you go with the idea that Shtari Bererin is where everybody's recording their claims in a document, so the Tanakama says they put their claims in the same document. Shmuel says either party has a right to say, I want my own document. I want my document. I don't want to be intimidated. But I will say what does come out from over here is the Gemara Paskins Kolfin Midas Stom. This is very important, that if I could do something that benefits someone else and it does not at all put me at a disadvantage, I can't refuse to do that. And if I refuse to do that, Bezin could force me to behave like a normal person. Normal people do good things for each other. You know, it's interesting. If doing something good for you is going to put me at a disadvantage, okay, I hear that perhaps I can't be forced to do that. But if doing something nice for you in no way disadvantages me, then why shouldn't I do it? What's the svara not to do it? Doesn't make any sense. Okay, says the Mishnah. Misha paramitzas chobo v'hishlish eshtaros. It's an interesting case. So let's say Reuven borrowed $1,000 from Shimon. Reuven paid back $500. And the document is deposited in the hands of a third party, right? So Reuven essentially paid back a third party to give to Shimon, and the third party is holding the document. And Reuven says, "Va'amar lo im lo nasati lecha mikayim ba'ad yom ploni tein lo shtaro." So Reuven says to the third party, he says, "Listen, if I don't pay the rest of the debt, in 30 days, give Shimon back the shtar." Now, giving Shimon back the shtar essentially allows Shimon to collect the entire debt again. So what's the halacha? So let's say 30 days go by and Reuven did not pay the remainder of the debt. So does a third party give the document to Shimon or not? Rabbi Yossi says, yes, give it. Third party give it to Shimon. Rabbi Yehuda Omer lo yitin. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, third party don't give it. Okay, so this is very interesting. So what's the machlokes? But my kamiflagi. So what's the machlokes over here? Rabbi Yossi holds asmachta kanya Rabbi Yehuda Savra Asmachta Lo Kanya. So I'll say this is an incredible machlokas. We've actually seen this before throughout our journeys in Shas, which is when someone makes a hyperbolic statement or what appears to be a hyperbolic statement, is that halachically binding or not? That hyperbolic statement is called asmachta. Sometimes a person will engage in hyperbole because they assume that the hyperbolic events will never come to actualize or come to pass. So for example, Reuven borrowed $1,000 from Shimon, he paid him back half. He's confident that he's going to go ahead and pay him back the rest. So he says, if I don't pay Shimon back within 30 days, third party, give the shtar back to Shimon so Shimon could collect a new. Now, by the way, it wouldn't be a ribbis problem, wouldn't be an interest problem because the first 500 would just be considered to be a gift. So the question is, does such a hyperbolic statement like that, does that create halachic realities or not? That's the machlokes. Rabbi Yossi Savar, Asmachta Kain, Rabbi Yossi holds even a hyperbolic statement is halachically binding. The Rabbi Yehuda Savar Asmachta Lo Kain. Rabbi Yehuda holds no, and Asmachta doesn't create. In other words, when Reuven makes that statement, he doesn't mean it to be true. What he ultimately means is he's trying to make a point that he's so ridiculously confident that he's going to pay off the rest of the debt. But he doesn't actually want it to be that if 30 days go by and he doesn't pay back on the remaining $500, the third party gives the shtar back to Shimon, That'd be crazy. So that's the machlokes over here. So the Gemara says, Amrav Nachman, Amrav Ravu, Amrav, Halach Rabbi Yossi. The halacha is like Rabbi Yossi that asmachta kanya, hyperbolic statement does create a halachic reality. Amrav Lahu, V'chem Ya'achas Rabbi Yochanan Malamdeno Pam Rishona Ushni Halach Rabbi Yossi, Ani Ma'asa. So they said, so listen to this. They said, so when they came before Rabbi Ami, they said, just because Rabbi Yochanan has taught us one time, two times, that the halacha is like Rabbi Yossi, what should I do? Ve'in halach Rabbi Yossi. They both say the halacha is not like Rabbi Yossi. They both say we paskin asmachta lo kanya. That when someone makes a statement that is clearly hyperbolic, and again, they don't have das, that this is really, they don't have das, that this is supposed to create the transactional reality, it does not create the transactional reality. So therefore, actually, halacha l'maisa in this case, when Reuven doesn't pay back the remaining $500 in 30 days, the third party does not give back the shtar to Shimon, because we assume again, Reuven did not really mean for this hyperbolic statement to be halachically binding. Incredible. Weiter. So what's the interesting case over here? So let's say again, Reuven lent, well, we'll reverse it now. Reuven lent Shimon $1,000, right? So now Reuven obviously is holding the document. Something happened to the document, it got erased. The Rashbam says over here, it gets wet or it gets smeared, so the document is no longer legible. So what do you do in this kind of case? So what happens? Reuven gets the witnesses who signed on the transaction or who know about the transaction, brings them to Beis Din, and they essentially do like a certification of the document. Now the truth is here, it's not a typical certification document because normally Kiyum Shtaros requires an intact shtar. Here the whole chap is the shtar itself has been compromised. So they do a kiyum. What's the kiyum? Ish ploni ben ploni nimchak shtaro biyom ploni. Right. So again, Reuven, right, had a shtar, and Reuven ben Yaakov had a shtar, and his shtar was erased on so and so day biyom ploni. Both like Kuf Sameches Amud Beis 168b. Uploni Edav, and so and so and so and so were his witnesses. So they essentially uphold the transaction in Beis Din by testifying about the transaction. Okay, fascinating. Says the Gemara. Let's analyze. Tarabanan. Ezu kiyumo. So how do you do this? So let's play this out. What exactly is the process for this to unfold? Ezu kiyumo. So we'll say here essentially is the text. So again, Reuven lent Shimon $1,000. Again, everything's fine. Reuven's document gets ruined, gets wet, it gets smeared, it gets smudged. He's coming to Beis Din now, and essentially he needs Beis Din to certify this transaction. So what happens? So the Gemara says, what is the certification process in a case like this? Here we go. Second line, Kof Samech Chesem Beis. B'mosav Tlasa, Havina, Anu Ploni, Uploni, Uploni. So in front of the three of us judges, right? Ploni, Ploni, and Ploni. Hotzi Ploni ben Ploni shtar machak lefaneni. Reuven, we'll call him Reuven ben Yaakov, took out an erased shtar in front of us. Biyom Ploni, on so and so date. Uploni Edav, and ultimately so and so and so and so were the witnesses to the transaction that indeed this was a bona fide transaction that occurred. All right. So the Gemara says Uploni Edav. Vim kasubo who's kaknu le'edusan shel edim v'nimtzas edusan mechuvenes gova ve'notzarech lahabiraya. Now, there's two different ways that this shtar could play out. If it's written in the shtar that we, the Beis Din, we heard the testimony of the witnesses, right? We heard the testimony of the witnesses, and we verified their testimony. So therefore, it turns out that essentially they're also certifying the shtar. In other words, you could create a duality in this process. Remember, what's unfolding over here is Reuben lent Shimon $1,000. Reuben has a document. The document got compromised, right? It was rained on. It got wet. It smudged. It smeared. So now Reuben's coming to Beis Din. He sits in front of the Beis Din and he tells over the transaction. So Beis Din, on one hand, is recording, is certifying that Reuben came before us. These were the witnesses to the transaction. Now, if Beis Din goes forward and actually vets those witnesses, right? So part one is just Beis Din hearing Reuven, identifying the witnesses, and essentially rewriting the shtar. Okay, now that doesn't certify the shtar, that just creates a new shtar. Fine. There's an extra step. The extra step is if Beis Din vets the Eidim. So the Eidim give over the testimony. We heard their testimony. Their testimony goes ahead and checks out, which means they could also certify the document. So they could rewrite the document, and if they vet the witnesses, could certify it as well. But if they don't certify the witnesses, then ultimately, again, they'll rewrite the document. But remember, any document, just because you show up with the document, we've seen this already before, just because you show up with the document doesn't automatically make your claim true. That's right, there's a concept of kiyum shtaras. So the Gemara is just pointing out over here that in this process where Reuven comes to essentially recreate his document, there could be an additional certification process as part of this or not. So if it's certified, then Reuven walks out with a certified document. If it's not certified, he walks out with a document that still may need to be certified at a later date. Take a look at the Rashbam for just a moment. Second line from the top. So vim kasabo is kaknu sha'amdu elu Beis Din hamekaimen v'chakru edim achasumin bo lahara chasimasan v'nimtzu divrei mechuvanan. So again, there's essentially two different possibilities here. Possibility one is just recreation of the document. How do you do recreation of the document? Reuven comes, tells us what the claim was, brings the witnesses, right, who were part of this claim, and shkoyach, that's part one. Document has been recreated. If Beis Din now wants to check out those witnesses, right, examine them, investigate, they could also certify. But if they don't do that, then it's just a recreated document, but not certified. Incredible. Nikra pasal niskara kasher. So this is interesting. Now, Nikra means it was torn. Now the Rashbam points out over here is Nikra ayidei adam. If it was torn by a person, then the document is pasal. Niskara, if it got torn by itself, then it's kasher. We're going to discuss what that means in just a moment. Nimchak on netashtish. So again, if the document was erased, or netashtish means it just got smudged. Imri shumo nikar, if the original writing on the document is still recognizable, kasher. Ultimately, again, it's kasher. So let's go back to the first case. Hechi dami nikra, hechi dami niskara. So you're about to say it's interesting. Nikra and niskara sound like the same thing, getting ripped. But already the Rashbam says nikra means someone ripped the document, and niskara means it was torn by itself. Am Yisroel Yehuda, nikra kera shel Beis Din. So nikra means the document was torn by Beis Din. I will say, remember, after a document had served its purpose, Beis Din would tear it in order that it could not be reused. So if you see a document that is torn, and we'll see it's torn in the way that Beis Din would normally tear a document, then ultimately, again, the document is pasal. Niskara, on the other hand, if it's accidentally torn, this would be a tear, not like the tear of Beis Din. Says the Gemara, okay, hechi dami kara shel Beis Din. How exactly is it? Then obviously, what we're saying over here is that when Beis Din tears a document, they tear it in some type of unique fashion. So what's the unique way that Beis Din tears the document? Am Yehuda, makom edim umakom hazman umakom atoref. So this is interesting. So as I remember again, when Beis Din wanted to show that a document was no longer fit for use, they would tear it in the place of the witnesses, the date, and the TORAH. Remember again, the TORAH is the transactionally specific information as opposed to the tovos, which is the boilerplate information. So if you see a document torn in these spots, that's indicative that the document was used and it was Beis Din that is tearing this up now. versus just stam tear. Again, so that could just be whatever it is, the handling of the shtar. If it was torn in a crisscross fashion, that's how Beis Din would tear it. So we'll say, so bottom line, so interestingly enough, so while there's a machlokes exactly how Beis Din would tear a document when the document had served its purpose. So that's a general machlokes. That's a general machlokes. So now again, the Gemara says, so again, whether it's that they would tear the witnesses, the area of the witnesses, the date, and the Torah, or crisscross. If you see a document like that, that's clear that it's an invalid document. On the other hand, if you just see that like a document tore, just was clear like in a random way, the document itself is still kosher. A very interesting story. Hano arvoy de aslo pumpedisa. There were these Arabs who came to Pumbedisa. The havuka ansi adaita de inshi, or asa de inshi. Sorry. So what were these guys doing? They were coercing people to go ahead and sell their land, right? So in other words, they would pay for it. That's what it sounds like. But lamaisa, look at Rashbam. He says the ansi ala asa de inshi mitoch shayu balizroa kopen bale and losses kamashtaro shlo yuchol la'arer. So again, they would coerce them, whether they would pay them or not. But the point over here is they would coerce them, and they would also force the quote-unquote sellers, the landowners, to give over their shtar. Now, they were smart, because what happens, if you force someone to give you something, but the real owner still retains the shtar, he has the ability to reclaim it at a later date. So they were very smart. They said, they coerced the land, and they said, also give us the shtar. Okay. Also, so there were a group of landowners who came before Abaye. Amar lechse mar shtare, v'lichtov lan mar shtara achrinan alei, di misnos chad naktinan chad biadan. So it's interesting. So there were a group of landowners who knew what was coming down the pike. They knew they were going to be coerced to give over their land. So interesting that they came before Abaye, and they said to Abaye this: here's our shtar. We're going to show you the shtar. We know that these Arab guys are going to come and steal the lands from us. So what we'd like you to do is write us a new shtar. So we're presenting proof of ownership. Write for us a new shtar, so that this way, when the Arabs come and take the land and our shtar, we'll have another shtar that we'll be able to reclaim the land with. It's a great chap. The problem is that Abaye says this also. I would love to help, but I can't. What can I do for you? So we're going to see this more tomorrow's daf as well. Rav Safra says, you can't write two documents on the same parcel of land. Now, there's a very good reason for this. Dilma tarif v'hader b'tarif. Lest ultimately, again, you come to collect and to collect again. See, the issue over here is like this. If I buy a parcel of land from Reuven, and let's say now Reuven has creditors, and those creditors come and they seize the land from me in satisfaction of a pre-existing debt, I could use that document to collect land from other people that Reuven sold to. The problem is if there's two documents on one parcel, you could potentially do this repeatedly. We're going to see this more in tomorrow's Gemara. And also just logically, it makes sense that you can't have two deeds on the same parcel of land. You're clearly looking at a situation, you're creating a situation that is so easily exploitable. So Abaye says to the landowners, I want to help you, but there's nothing for me to do. So these guys were relentless, and understandably so. They didn't want to lose their land, so they were chattering Abaye, write the additional document. Abaye said to his scribe, Zil kosov luhu, hu ala machak ve'edav ala niyar. It's interesting. So Abaye says, okay, write for them. Now the guys were relentless. So the only way to get them to go away was to do something. But Abaye was not going to write a second proper shtar on the same parcel, because that's illegal. So what did he do? He told his sofer, write for the shtar, hu ala machak, write the text on an erased piece of parchment, ve'edav al haniyar, and the signature of the witnesses on unerased parchment. We saw this on Sunday. Such a shtar like that is possible, right? Why? Because lamaisa, again, you could exploit that type of shtar. So it's on Sunday. So, but 1 second. So in Pashas, we assume that what is Abaye saying? Write for them the shtar, then erase it, and then write it again. and then write it again. And that way you'll have the text on an erased piece of parchment, the signature of the witnesses on a non-erased piece of parchment, and such a shtar as possible, like we saw, because again, it could be tampered with. But one second, isn't there a concern that if they're writing the shtar and then erasing it, that some of the original print from the first shtar will remain? And again, what did we say? We said that Allah Chalamayis, if you have a shtar that's been erased or that's been smudged, if some of the original text is visible, halacha l'maaseh, the shtar still remains kosher. To which the Gemara says, "V'dam rishuma nikar, v'tanya nimchak on nitashdesh im rishumo nikar kosher." So we just learned before that halacha l'maaseh, if you have a document and you wrote on it and then you erased it, if some of the original text is still visible, halacha l'maaseh, it's kosher. Amar le mi ka'amina shtara ma'alya aleph beis va'alma ka'aminan. No. So it comes along, Abai says, no. I did not mean that halacha l'maaseh should go ahead and actually write the actual shtar, erase it, and then write it again. I just said, write some letters, write the aleph beis, erase that, and then go ahead and write the shtar on top of it. So again, therefore, there's no concern that some of the letters from the first shtar would remain visible even after it was erased. Good, and therefore I'm supposed to say, so again, this is what Abai did, and halacha l'maaseh, in order to get them to go away. So essentially what the Gemara is introducing to us, so again, if we kind of just like review over here for just a moment, what the Gemara halacha l'maaseh is creating for us over here is this model of when your shtar gets erased. What do you do when your shtar gets erased? So essentially, again, there's the ability to recreate it in Beis Din, come before Beis Din with the claim, witnesses who witnessed it, and that's it. Good, recreate the shtar. If Beis Din wants to go ahead and certify it, they could also go ahead and examine the witnesses and ultimately see what's going on. In addition to that, once the shtar has been ripped, then halacha l'maaseh it's compromised, but only if it's clear that it's the type of rip that Beis Din would rip, either again crisscross or in certain strategic pieces of information. But it just stama rip because it looks like the shtar has been handled, then halacha l'maaseh again the shtar will still remain kosher. From the story of Abaye, and again this is going to be tomorrow's topic much more, but from the story of Abaye we see that halacha l'maaseh you can't write two shtaros on the same piece of land. So again, these householders, these landowners who were trying to prevent the total theft, the total loss, by asking Abaye to write up a second shtar, Abaye, and again, this is one of these interesting stories where, Abaye, he told them no, but they would not take no for an answer. So he had to do something just to get them to go away, but Lamaisa again gave them a shtar that essentially was in effect. So I think that there's a tremendous musar. In general, these stories always are interesting. We've seen stories like this before where people come to the Rav for help and the Rav is not able to help them, and so like we've seen this before, so Abai gave them essentially a pasul shtar, but just like, okay, I gave you something, go away. I think there's a tremendous musar haskell on this, which is not every problem has a solution. It's one of those things. I think when we're young and hopefully incredibly overwhelmingly idealistic, we think every problem could be solved. Every problem could be solved, and every issue could be worked through. And then as we get older, hopefully we're still filled with incredible idealism, but I think we also recognize that there are some unsolvable problems. Sometimes problems are unsolvable because, like in a relationship, I might want to solve a problem very much, but there's another person in the relationship. If they don't want to solve it, there's nothing for me to do. And then in life, there are just certain circumstances that are just overwhelming and certain circumstances that are just difficult. And no matter how much I want to try to address something, it doesn't automatically mean that somehow resolution is going to occur. To me, that's what's so profound about this story. These guys came to Abaye and they have a legitimate problem. They're about to have their land seized by this Arab who's going to take the land and the shtar because the thief knows what he's doing. And they're coming to Abaye for a pitaron, like, give us a solution. And Abaye says, I don't have anything to give you. I don't have anything to give you, which on one hand is so profoundly frustrating. You have nothing to give us, no solution, no answer. But both say that's part of our avoda also. We've spoken so many times like this is teku. Teku is a little bit different because when the Gemara says teku means there will be a resolution, just not right now. Tishbi Mashiach. Okay, so there's certain things that can't resolve now, but they'll get resolved later. But maybe there's another bucket of things that can't get resolved. Not every problem has a solution, and not every difficulty has an approach. And sometimes What we just need to be able to do is to live with the unsolvable problems. It doesn't mean I can't mitigate them. It doesn't mean that I can't ameliorate them. I can't address them in some way, but sometimes there's not a solution to be had. And when there's not a solution to be had, you just got to accept that, take it, and move yourself forward. All right, so I'll stop over here for today. Shkoyach, everyone. Wishing everyone an incredible day. Again, I'm sorry that I'm not there with you in person, but a great zechus to be able to learn with you. Have a great day, everyone.